Hello. If the title of the video has not shocked you, please do not be alarmed. This is something we have to talk about. My channel is Exploring Christianity, so I will explore all aspects of Christianity, even those taboo subjects which you're just too embarrassed to talk about. And this is the problem, let's just spare ourselves from embarrassment, if we're brave enough to hit the streets and shout at the top of our voice the gospel of Jesus Christ, then as far as I'm concerned, we're brave enough to tackle this. And it was actually at my college, my theological college, where I stumbled across this book. And at first I thought it said naturalism, which is a form of atheism, but no, it was naturism. And I was like, wow, this is something I have to get my teeth into. And you're probably thinking, why? And I'll tell you why, because very recently I was on holiday and I was doing a walk and I stumbled across a naturist beach. And there was a rather glarish sign warning that there's going to be naked people past this point. And it put me in a bit of a predicament. It was either walk through it, without staring too long at anybody, or walk 20 miles round to get to where I wanted to go. Well, there was no way I was going to walk 20 miles round or go through treacherous forests, jumping over fences just to avoid this beach. So I decided that I would walk through it. But just as I decided that I was going to walk through it, there was another sign saying it is etiquette for you to strip your clothes off if you are going to walk through this point, because naturists may be offended. And I couldn't help chuckle to myself, because if it was on the other foot and I took all my clothes off and walked up the local high street, I'm pretty sure I would offend a few people. And I'm pretty sure I would get locked up, because in laws in this country, if you cause somebody to be offended or distressed, that's a violation for public indecency. So I could be thrown up, arrested, and potentially put on the sex offenders list. So I found it was a little bit rich, but then again, it was just a advisory. Of course, it wasn't mandated. But I thought to myself, well, I don't want to offend other people by walking through with my clothes on, because as a Christian we live our life trying not to offend people. So I decided to compromise, and I took everything off except for my shorts, and I walked through the beach, which isn't crazy, seeing it's a beach and most people are half naked on the beach anyway. But I think the point that I'm trying to get at is, why should there be any shame and embarrassing if I was to walk across naked? Because surely the only shame and embarrassment can come from me. And if I'm not ashamed and embarrassed, then what's the harm? And that really prompted me to read this book and find out, where in scripture does it say naturism is bad, if it's bad at all? What about historically? What about across cultures? Is naturism really a taboo, or is it just a taboo in Western society? So this book I found to be really, really good. It starts off talking about the background and history of naturism, how it started, and it also talks about where it is in scripture and the tradition of it, the practical element of it, and the experience you gain from being involved in this, and it concludes with whether it's acceptable or not. So after reading through it, and it's got a small pamphlet, it's only about like 20 pages. I think the biggest eye opener was probably the first the first paragraph, where it said there are 500,000 naturists registered on the Central Council of British Naturism. And that's just in Britain, 500,000, considering there's 70 million, I think, in the United Kingdom. That's quite a big percentage, and it says that it's rapidly increased in the last 5 years. It's actually gone up 20% in 5 years. Now, as you go on to read further and further, you realise that, like anything, there isn't just a blanket stereotype with naturists. They take all different forms, and it's important that we don't just airbrush them as all the same types of people. But what did astound me is the culture of it. Basically, it started off in the 60s in England, and it was always a very family orientated thing. So you'd get families that would go to these beaches or camps, and they'd all strip off naked, and there's nothing sexual in the slightest. And this is the problem when people conflate naturism with pornography. When pornography is specifically showing certain genital or immodest body parts to evoke pleasure in other people. With this, it's just being completely at one with nature, and that's how most naturists see it, hence the name Naturism. Of course, in the animal kingdom, everybody's naked. We know from the book of Genesis that before the fall, we were all indeed naked, and I think this is the justification why naturists feel that they want to embrace this lifestyle, because they feel like, especially in this day and age where everyone is showing off their status, or how wealthy they are, people that wear flash clothes, for example. And it's like, no, why don't we all be in an environment where we're all on the same level, and that there's true equality. And this pamphlet does interview a few people just to get perspective on that. Obviously, I'm doing a book review, so I can't talk about everything. I think the biggest shock with the history of naturism was actually Hitler. He didn't like it. He actually stopped social gatherings of naturists. One of the reasons was because apparently a lot of intellectuals like this kind of thing. It's not just something that people that are a little bit backward or slow or barbaric do. In fact, it's quite a niche lifestyle by the sounds of what's written in this book. And you think, okay, so are you going to use the Bible to justify it, Dan? Are you going to bring up scripture? Well, it seems as if both authors of this book have not been able to find anything that actually condemns it in the Bible. Bearing in mind, this is published Cambridge University. Karen Gorham is actually a female pastor, degree educated. She knows her stuff. And Dave Leal is actually a scholar in philosophy. So these aren't your run-of-the-mill journalists who thought they dipped their toes in this subject. These are people that actually know their stuff, and they brought out some real eye-openers. I mean, I didn't know that Saul stripped naked when he made a prophecy in Samuel. Did not know that. I also did not know that King David stripped naked in front of the Ark of the New Covenant. And he was actually rebuked by a guy called Michal. But not because, he was naked in front of a few female servants, but actually because he was naked in front of the presence of God. Which I found odd because obviously God sees everything. But it's mentioned several times in scripture, and which is, it's quite alarming. And I think the most fascinating thing for me, actually, was reading about the fact that the early Christians used to baptize people naked. And there's evidence of this in the writings of Saint Cyprian. He accounted for this. And he basically said that Jesus Christ was crucified and scourged naked. And baptism is meant to symbolize, obviously, the crucifixion of Christ, being buried with Christ, and then rising with Christ. So it seemed very fitting in the first few hundred years where people would strip naked to get baptized. And if you want evidence of this, that's one of the reasons why they used to get female servers, i.e. deacons, because women would undress other women so they can be baptized. So it's quite fascinating to read that. And however, there was a few objection in the year 300 and year 400. I think one of the reasons is because in that culture, the Roman culture, there were a lot of Roman spas where all sorts of degenerate behaviour used to happen there, especially with young children. I don't know if you're well informed on that kind of thing, but yeah, they weren't seen as holy places, let's just say that. So I think that's the reason why people like Clement of Alexandria, for example, which is says in the 2nd century, and Cyprian in the 3rd century, condemned this kind of thing, because they said it's like an immodesty, especially with females, as you can imagine. Especially, we're coming out of the Jewish culture. Christianity back then was very much seen as a Jewish sect. So women walking around with their top off. I mean, it was actually Jewish culture where women and men should even bathe together, and that's still the case now. So you can see why it was condemned, but you have to put it into context. They are talking about mixed bathing. They are talking about going to certain places in the Hellenistic world, which had a lot of pagan worship. So of course they're going to be against it. But if you're among fellow believers, is it a problem? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly not mentioned anywhere here. But yeah, believe it or not, sorry, I did make a mistake. It was Saint Cyril of Jerusalem. Yes, Saint Cyril of Jerusalem actually advocated, and I can quote it here. He was the Bishop of Jerusalem between AD 387 to 417. He said, "As soon then as ye entered, ye put off your tunic. Having stripped yourself, ye were naked. In this also imitating Christ, who was stripped naked on the cross, and by his nakedness put off from himself the principalities and powers, and openly triumphed over them on the tree." And then it goes on to about getting baptized. In fact, the Eastern Orthodox Church still baptize people naked. You can look this up. It's still an Eastern rite. So yeah, I didn't know that. I found that fascinating. I also found it fascinating that Roman emperors often used to have photographs naked, and they used to do artistic impressions of them naked just to show their power. Apparently, the gods were often seen as powerful when they were naked, like Zeus, for example. So it was a way of showing your prowess and power. So that I didn't know. I also didn't know about Saint Francis of Assisi, a very famous saint. It's documented in his writings that he actually stripped off naked in front of his bishop and his father when they told him that he was crazy for wanting to take the vow of poverty and to go out in the wilderness. So he made a point, which back then in their culture was, if you take all your clothes off, you're literally showing that you're ashamed of something. So I think it was his way to sort of really emphasize, like, I'm going to do this and I don't care. So I'm going to take my clothes off just to prove it. So unashamedly, Francis took a vow, and he used naked as a way to do that, because back then nakedness was very much seen as a sign of purity. That's why angel depictions are often shown as naked. Of course, it's a sign of purity because that's how God made us. God made Adam from the dust, who was indeed naked. And if you remember, he had to find a fig to cover himself up. So theologically, you can see that now it's just a little bit more blurry. Did you know there were Christian cults? Sorry, I don't want to use the word cults, but they're Christian organizations, churches, where their whole congregation was naked. Several, they're all written here. So you had the Picards in the 13th century France, and also, most famously, the Adamites, not the Edomites, the Adamites in 15th century Netherlands. So no wonder they had a big reformation over there. No, I'm only joking. Right, so yeah, it's very, very fascinating. You see as you read through this book that it's very balanced. It tries to show an honest picture, an overview of naturism, without distorting it anyway and making it over sexualized, because I think that's the big problem. People over sexualize it too much, and that's why there's a negative view of it. you know, at my old gym, there was a Jewish guy, and I was chatting to him in the sauna, and I couldn't believe it. He goes, yeah, I'm really ashamed of myself. Last week, I was in a naked spa, and I bumped into my rabbi, and I had to duck and hide under the water, and I managed to hold my breath for 2 minutes by almost passing out, so that the rabbi could walk past and not notice me. He was ashamed, and I said to him, "Do you not think your rabbi would be equally as ashamed being caught in this spa by you? I think it looks worse for him." And he said, yeah, good point, but I just couldn't live with it. I couldn't go to the synagogue every week seeing that he see me naked. And I just think that's because of the fact that from a young age we've been conditioned into thinking that it's some kind of like perversion, or that it's wrong. And I have to say, reading this book has given me a completely different overview. And if I could turn back the clock when I was at that beach, and by the way, there's a YouTube short a month ago documenting when I was at that beach, that I wouldn't be embarrassed and just walk through being naked. But I was so worried about being a sinner and being condemned by God. I even had to do a repentance prayer afterwards, because I felt dirty and it felt wrong. But now I'm reading this and realizing, well, actually, there's actually two sides to the coin. I mean, it's fascinating. I'm reading all this stuff. I mean, what a great point this is. To be naked before one's husband or wife is not to experience any appropriate real shame, as one would about sin. The shame is rather not to look like Gwyneth Paltrow or Sylvester Stallone. So in other words, you know, if you had a body of a Greek god, six-pack, you know, and had everything to be desired, would you be ashamed? That's what I'm saying. It's a subjective thing, isn't it? But it got me thinking, and I'm like, yeah, that is a really good point. When it talked about the practical element of it, someone tried to say that there are actual health benefits, and I did chuckle, and I felt, no, I think that's a step too far. I think to say that there's actually health benefits from walking around naked is a pretty lame argument. Says here, so the habit of wearing clothes makes the skin anemic and hinders the vasomotor reflexes, thus disturbing the circulation of the blood and rendering the skin abnormally sensitive to heat and cold. Okay, stop there. You don't have to justify it using health benefits. Just admit it. Just say you want to feel free and at one with nature. You know, you want to get rid of your tan lines, whether that be for vanity or not. But remember, there is a link between vanity and mental health. So often if you feel good, that you know that you look good, that's good for your mental well-being. Call a spade, you know. This bit I had to grind my teeth on. I felt this was wrong. It says, parents can allow their children to wander undressed throughout the grounds without a worry as their moral and physical safety. Car doors are left unlocked, purses and wallets lie unattended beside vacant sunbeds. Idyllic in a way, yes. Escapism, probably. Yeah, I get the escapism part, but would you really let your children run around away from your surveillance, where in a day and age where we know there's loads of degenerate perverts about, and those degenerate perverts are going to target naturist areas? There ain't no 2, 3, 4, 5 way about it. And if it's in a public beach, you know, somewhere like, for example, Studlands in Dorset, which is actually run by the Natural Trust, anyone can go there. You're actually putting your children in direct harm. Not wise. I think that's too much of a risk to let kids run around. You know, maybe in the 60s you'd have got away with it, but let's be real now. That presents huge safeguarding issues. Now, I love the bit where it said you can leave all your stuff. That's great, because you wouldn't be able to do that in somewhere like Barcelona, you know, a built-up city, you know, with hustle and bustle. I mean, you can't even walk around with things in your back pocket anymore in those type places. So yeah, I mean, let's be honest, you're not going to get very far. If you decide to steal somebody's wallet or sunglasses, where are you actually going to put it? You're naked without pockets. Unless, of course, you're one of those awful clothed people, textile people that walk through naturist beaches In that case, you have to be very suspicious. They might be loiterers and thieves. Yeah. But yeah, no, that did make me chuckle. And I just think there's insight after insight. And when I read at the very end about the background of these people, thinking, oh, maybe they're naturists. Apparently they're not. But the lady, Karen Gorham, is apparently in support to a few naturist friends, apparently. Wow. You know. Yeah, okay, I'm not saying anything. So the book concludes with, is naturism acceptable, right? And I think it's quite a good response. It actually quotes from John Paul II, which I'm going to read. This is what the Pope thinks. See, this is the good thing about the Catholic Church. They will talk about any issue if it has an ethical connotation. Like, they're not scared to talk about surrogacy. They're not scared to talk about clones, AI, all these things that we wrestle with, you know, whether they're immoral or moral, the Catholic Church will have a stance on, because you can go through the Bible, but you're not always going to get answers. So let's just see what a holy man thinks. John Paul II, who's now passed, bless him, he says, there are circumstances in which nakedness is not immodest. If someone takes advantage of such an occasion to treat the person as an object of enjoyment, so this is the whole pornography thing that I was talking about, it is only he who is guilty of shamelessness, not the other. Yeah, so if someone wants to get off on seeing a naked woman, that's their prerogative, not the naked woman. She's just come to take her clothes off. Sexual modesty cannot then, in any simple way, be identified with the use of clothing, nor shamelessness with the absence of clothing and total or partial nakedness. Immodesty is present only when nakedness plays a negative role with regard to the value of the person. When its aim is to arouse concupiscence, as a result of which the person is put in the position of an object for enjoyment, there are certain objective situations in which even total nudity of the body is not immodest. So, it's not immodest, according to the Pope, to take all your clothes off. It only becomes immodest when someone gets aroused by it. Just like it only becomes offensive if someone is offended by it, which is why we have laws where you can't walk around naked. However, if you do choose to walk around naked, there is a town called Cap d'Agde in the south of France. It's a very big village. I believe there's probably about 10,000 people inhabiting it, mostly tourists, but you can even walk around a supermarket naked there. And I would assume they probably have a church or chapel where you can worship naked. I'm not promoting it, but that's also in this book. Fascinating. I really did enjoy it. It's just something that never gets talked about. So I thought, why not do a video on it? I'm exploring Christianity, aren't I? And you know, watch it in your own discretion. Have a little chuckle. But most importantly, if you're still not sure if it's moral or not, pray on it. But to me, there's nothing really condemning it if it's done in the right context. And I think that's hugely important. If it's in a naturist only area, then you're not offending anybody, and hopefully you won't be arousing anybody. And if that does happen, that's them, not you. The authors conclude with this very good paragraph, which I decided to highlight. It says, we return now to our initial questions and draw out some implications regarding the compatibility of naturism and Christianity. There appears, firstly, to be no biblical grounds either for a promotion of social nudity or for placing a complete ban on it. So, highlighting what I just said. Clearly, though, there is an important distinction to be drawn between physical nakedness and sexual impurity. There is also the issue of concern for other people and for their own way of living. You know, how many people, when the weather's nice, strip off naked and sunbathe in their garden? You know, you hope that your neighbours can't see it, don't you? Would you now think twice about doing that? Providing that your neighbours can't see you, why not? it's only God that's going to see you naked. And even David thought it was okay to strip in front of the tabernacle. So, and he was a great prophet and a great king. So I'm not sure where there's an issue with it. I think you have also life art, which is a common thing. You have Renaissance art. You know, how many beautiful cathedrals do we have where it's just full of naked art? You know, and most people say, you know, that is an epitome of beauty, you know, and purity. Like I said earlier, you wouldn't look at it and think, oh, that's horrible, take that down. You would embrace it, wouldn't you? So I kind of get what they're trying to say, the author. You know, I think it's a distorted stereotype that we're all guilty of, and I think we have to try and remove that and see it for what it is, which is basically people that want to be comfortable. And what's really great, I think, from my own insight of going through a naturist beach, like I confessed earlier, was you see all different types of people. It's not all body beautiful people. You'd actually think, wouldn't you, the people that are going to strip off naked are all going to be body beautiful. They're going to look like they do in the Vogue magazines or Muscle Fitness, when in actual fact, they're all shapes and sizes. You know, what is it that great philosopher said? It's there's no such thing as perfect, but you can be imperfectly perfect. So beauty is an old eye beholder. And if you're comfortable in your own skin and you can strip off your clothes, you've jumped over one of the biggest hurdles going. Because so many people now struggle with confidence these days. And this could be a way to lift that confidence. You know, wouldn't it go to sky high if you were to do that and you wouldn't get funny looks? Because I can guarantee no one on these beaches is going to give you funny looks for walking through them naked. They're more likely to give you a funny look if you walk through with your clothes on, which is very unetiquette. No, not inetiquette, if that's a word. So yeah, so it's 27 minutes in. Let's try and wrap this up within the half hour. I highlighted this bit at the very end of the conclusion. It says that Christian naturists might likely to cause offence or discomfort to their fellow Christians, or just as importantly for those who might be less inclined to listen to the Christian gospel because of their activities. So in other words, you know, would you tell other Christians in your church that you do this activity? And a lot of them wouldn't, because they're worried about being judged. However, it can be easier spreading the gospel in an area where everybody is naked than in an area where everyone's got clothes on, because you're going to be less embarrassed. Because some people, let's be honest, are embarrassed of sharing Christianity and the gospel. They don't want to be seen as Bible loons, Bible bashers. You know, people immediately get turned off, you know, when they hear sometimes the gospel, from my experience. So if you're naked, then you've overcome the biggest hurdle. So I think, you know, you're more likely to have an open-minded mindset. So what a great evangelism tool, you know, preaching the gospel in a naked beach or forest or woodland. I thought that was great. I had to highlight that. And let's just finish with the last paragraph. It says, one Christian naturist writes this: Naturism isn't a panacea for the world's problems, but maybe the attitude of mind that allows you to accept the gift of your body as completely acceptable and as intended by the giver is just one more step along the path towards a saner society. And that's exactly what I was saying earlier about mental health. You know, what a remedy for mental health, you know, when everybody is in their purest state. What a sign of temperance and strength and zeal. And I can see the benefits of naturism. Now, it's not something that I per se would want to do or partake in or feel like a massive urge. But if I was put in a situation like I was on holiday, then I certainly wouldn't condemn or look down at it. And I think this is a great video to shed light on that subject. Anyway, if you like the video, give it a good thumbs up. Don't forget to share it if you think this is relevant to anybody or friends or family or anyone you might think would be interested or intrigued by it all. Hit the bell if you want to hear more, and most importantly, please subscribe if you've not already. I want to grow this channel. Anyway, God bless, brothers and sisters, and take care.